Never mind. Hi.
We are live, and we almost were talking about the streaker that we had in our neighborhood that apparently was running around naked.
I did not see him.
Did he have a mask on?
You know what?
He had green sneakers.
Maybe that's all he had. He had blue sneakers.
Oh, no, I thought they were green.
He just went a little nutty from being in seclusion for so long.
Probably.
Well, really, you can kind of analyze that because you would know better than us, right, Nicole?
I think we all know about it.
Yeah.
So welcome, everybody, to our happy hour with Bridget and I. My name is Colleen.
My name's Bridget.
And today we have Nicole Christina on the left. She is a psychotherapist. My phone is talking to me. And Patty Gale on the right, and she is a financial therapist. And we thought today we would talk about, how to deal with some coping skills now that some people have been on lockdown or stay at home since the middle of March. And some people are just having it now. And some people have been laid off or their spouses or their children are home and they're having to deal with financial issues. So we thought, let's talk about it and go from there. So hi, Nicole.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as can be expected. I just took a walk with my dogs earlier, and I saw one of my friends driving, and we were saying, we're doing okay, but the sleep's not great. So that's where it's showing up. I'm very fortunate in that I'm working from home. I'm seeing all of my psychotherapy clients remotely. So I feel incredibly fortunate. But I am really missing my tennis friends, and I am really missing my knitting group. And just like everybody else, it's weird, and I can't make an excuse to go to the store because I really don't need sherry vinegar to get through the week. I want to go because I just want to be out in the world, but that's not what's happening now.
Exactly. What about you, Patty? You have a child home now, right, from college?
Well, she actually was going to our community college for her first year, and so she's been home.
Okay.
So she's been home, but now all of her classes transitioned online. And so now the big concern is, because she's transferring in the fall, and so the big concern for a lot of students now is this going to be over by the time school starts, especially for colleges in the fall, to get those kids in the dorms.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's start with Nicole. Like I said before, people have been kind of cooped up for a couple weeks now, maybe longer. Once you start getting a little stir crazy in the house, do you have any suggestions for people to kind of bring the anxiety down a little bit?
Well, I'm always a fan of recognizing what's going on first, and then you can go from there. So just validating, I think, for yourself that being cooped up gets pretty old. People get agitated. They're bored. They're really unsettled because the routine's all off. I have a friend of mine, and basically her hobby is shopping. I mean, she's just out there all the time. We have this huge mall in Syracuse. She's either buying or returning things. I hope she doesn't watch this. So that's kind of taken away, 85% of what she does. And she just called me and said, I'm just driving in circles now. I'm losing my mind. And I think it really depends on what kind of person you are. Some of my clients are saying, I was made for this. I love being home and not having to, face crowds and just sort of being in my cozy little bubble. But I think to validate what parts are really hard, and if you miss your people, whoever they are, to admit to yourself, I'm lonely, I'm missing my people, and not pretending or distracting away from it. And then from there, you say, what can I do? And it might be as simple as texting them, or our tennis coach is going on Facebook and making these really hammy, silly, goofy videos for us. And so that's a lovely way of being connected. But I'm a big believer in not arguing with reality. It is hard. It's hard for a reason. We're mammals. We're supposed to be in our, in our little groups, and it's painful. So, I'm doing things. I'm baking bread, which has been fun. I'm knitting a lot, but it feels hard.
Where'd you get yeast?
Well, if you really want to know, there's yeast everywhere, and you can apparently use wild yeast, which is news to me. But I actually had some in the fridge because, we've been using a bread machine. But I thought I got time to knead bread, and so that's fun. But there's certainly a loss, and I think it's important to admit that to ourselves that we're hurting.
Yeah.
What about those people that were working 9 to 5, have been working 9 to 5 forever, and now all of a sudden they're not working 9 to 5 anymore?
Wow.
Do you suggest like keeping your schedule? Like if you been getting up at 7 o'clock for years, to maintain getting up and trying to keep a schedule?
It's interesting because I've seen a lot of those articles. I've seen it on Facebook. These are the things you should do. I'm not a cookie cutter kind of gal. I mean, I'm not that kind of person. So I would say what works for you. If keeping a schedule feels good to you, if putting on your work clothes feels good to you, then that, and I would do it. I haven't found that important to me particularly. I'm happy to be in sweatpants. My clients only see me from the waist up as you are. So I think, it's not a one size fits all. We're all different. Some of us are a little bit more rigid than others. Others are like, let's see how I feel. So it's really a matter of testing it out on yourself and say, well, yesterday I didn't get out of my pajamas. How did that feel? Today I'm thinking maybe I'll wear a new shirt or something. See how it feels. I don't believe in kind of a cookie cutter way to think about this.
Go ahead, Bridget.
Well, I was getting ready to ask Patty about, this is such a rough, different time, and so many people have lost jobs. And so do you have any advice, like if you just found out you lost your job, do you have any advice for a person like that?
Sure. So the first thing really you're going to want to do is file for unemployment. That's going to be the biggest thing. Filing for unemployment, whether it's you or you and your spouse, regardless, anyone in your household that was working and is not working now due to being laid off or even furloughed because of the situation, you're absolutely going to want to file for unemployment. That's really the first step, because I don't know exactly what the waiting period is or how fast they're actually processing those. But I know we've seen, or they've seen, something like close to 10 million.
I just saw that.
Have now filed for unemployment. So that is absolutely the first thing to do.
I was just watching our Governor Cuomo in New York, and he said that the system crashed, and that they're working, at least in New York State, they're working with Google to get the system operational this afternoon, because so many people are so really angry and frustrated.
I've heard a lot of states that's happened, where they're trying to file and everything crashes and everything's down. In fact, did you guys see where they're asking programmers who know how to do COBOL, which is like the ancient language of the
really? I remember that in high school.
Because so much of the things are not updated, so they need people who are good with COBOL to come back and update that.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? Wow. Yeah, I just couldn't believe that.
What about the difference, Patty, between someone who might be furloughed for a few weeks or indefinitely and someone who has actually been laid off? Is someone furloughed, can they get unemployment?
They should check first with their state, because each state's going to be a little bit different. Because if that employer, because now like employers, if they're furloughed, but if they're still being paid, those employers can actually file for that paycheck protection program. So that's going to allow the businesses to keep paying the employees, even though they may be furloughed, so to speak, for not working. So they're going to definitely want to check with their state as well as their employer.
And we've heard such nightmare stories about this whole small business protection, that some banks are actually closing because they've reached their cap of amounts. Is there a timeline for that? Like, are people, if they don't get their small business requests in on time, do they?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, they're going to want to check the CARES Act specifically. And I know the IRS.gov website really pretty much spells that out as far as where all of that information is. But yeah, I know banks have been having a lot of problems. And I think for those decision makers who are, making these policies right now, they're all just kind of figuring things out too, as they're going along. So there may be some things that are going to be changing. So they're definitely going to want to check the CARES Act and the IRS.gov website for sure.
Now, I know we've spoken, Patty, about, we just taped an episode. You will be coming up soon. We talked about the fact that people who shouldn't be worrying right now about paying off debts, like pay your minimum on a credit card. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Because right now, pretty much everybody, your cash flow is your main priority. So that is your absolute main priority. Now, of course, if you are in a financial position to continue to pay down debt as you normally were, then of course, by all means. But if you just lost a job, or if you are a business owner that, had your clients all of a sudden can't pay you, you want to make sure that your cash flow is your absolute priority. So what you're going to do first is you're going to look at, from a personal perspective, you're going to look at your monthly subscriptions. That's like the very first thing. Like, what can you start cutting in order to save, in order to make sure that at least you have some kind of reduced expenses and outlay that are going out? Because in this kind of time that we're all dealing with right now, everybody's pretty much in survival mode. So you are looking at, whether it be your mortgage or rent, food to put on the table and keep the lights on in your house, right? Nobody's really going anywhere, so you don't really have to worry so much about the gas in your car. I just read the other day, since many, millions of us are not driving right now, there are a lot of auto insurance companies that are starting to cut or reduce or give discounts on your monthly car insurance premium. So you're going to want to check with whoever your auto insurance provider is.
Yeah, I read that too.
Yeah, so that's
great information.
Yeah. So in that same note, like if you have run into, I'm sorry, we have a question. It says, as a sole proprietor of a business, am I entitled to unemployment? Do you know anything about that?
So as a sole proprietor, a lot of that too is going to depend on, there are a couple of different programs. There's the SBA.gov website that you're going to want to go to, because there's a program now that sole proprietors and small businesses can apply for. They call it up to, and I want to stress the up to $10,000 advance, but you don't, from what I understand, as of this point in time, because things are changing all the time, that is, you don't have to pay that back.
Okay.
So you have to fill out an application. It's on the SBA website, and you have to put in, what your revenue is, cost of goods, and things like that. But yeah, absolutely go to that. I don't know about the actual unemployment, but for small businesses, I know that's what they've put in place for that kind of advance.
Okay. And then on that, on that same note, Nicole, like she has given us advice. Oh, okay. I was just saying, she gave us the advice, like somebody laid off, what are some things you should do? And having financial stressors, can add so much stress to anything you've already had. Adding that to it, do you have any advice for people that are just feeling this tremendous financial stress right now?
Oh boy, that's so hard, because Patty mentioned survival mode. I mean, that puts us in a whole nother level of fear. And I think, the answer, there's no magic bullet for that. I think it's like, boy, you just do the best you can, all the while realizing of course you're going to be stressed out. So there's this validation of like, of course I'm like overeating, or of course I'm watching 8 hours of Netflix, because if I don't, my head's going to explode. And I feel really badly for those people. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the domestic violence has taken a huge increase. And what we see is that particularly men, when they're feeling stressed financially, that seems to really affect aggression, which, we can imagine. I mean, that doesn't mean you're going to be violent, but it certainly makes us so fearful, because, we know what can happen. I mean, a lot of people who are homeless were, working, they just weren't able to afford
a home.
Right. So it's real. I mean, that's not a joke. And I really feel for people who are in that position, who also may have kids. That's a horrible position to be in.
Yes.
Very frightening.
It is.
Absolutely. Speaking of children, there are a lot of kids coming home from college early, and you're having a full house again. The stress of not only going through this, but being now a house full of people. How important is it for everyone to kind of have their space and their ability to, yes, you want to find the gratitude in spending time together as a family, which is wonderful, but it shifts the whole dynamic when you've got kids home that you weren't prepared mentally to be at home.
And they're stressed out too. They don't know. I'm having clients. I live right near Syracuse University. And so I see a lot of students, and they're now, of course, all online. And apparently, I didn't realize this, but some of that tech is really stressful. Like one of my clients was like, you're getting on Blackboard, then there's a folder, then there's chat. And like even navigating this new way of working online is stressing kids out. So you're not going to be getting a really relaxed kid. I just suggested to my client, who has 2 young kids who follow her everywhere, to go in the bathroom, lock the door, run the shower, pretend that they're taking a shower, sit on the toilet, and do some just deep breathing for a few minutes. And I guess the answer to that is get some time alone, however you can. I mean, sit out on your driveway if you have to, but you have to be able to sort of rest and pause and just kind of take a break from all of this that's circling around us. It's incredibly stressful.
Compounding that stress of having the kids home is also, they're now out of work. Some of them go to work and school. So Patty, in that vein, how often you were saying that under 17 kids can't file for the unemployment right now? Is that correct?
So the under 17, so the stimulus package that was put together in your household, it's based on a couple of things. It's based on your adjusted gross income. And again, all of that is also spelled out on the irs.gov website. But it also applies to children that you have living at home that are 17 and under. So if you have a 17 and under child at home, I believe it's $500 per child. However, if you have, like in my situation, my daughter's 19. She was working, even though she was going to school locally. And because of all of this too, she lost her job. You may still have a family. If you have a high schooler who's still 17 or 18, unfortunately, they're not going to qualify. I would suggest if that child was working part-time and lost their job because of this, whether they're 17 or 18 in high school or even a college student, have them apply for unemployment. Again, they may get very little, they may get nothing, but you don't know until you apply. So at least that gives them something, even if it's, I don't know, $60 a month, at least it's something that they have that's coming in until things all settle out and they can get either back to their previous employer or, finding a new job if their previous employer is not in a position to rehire them.
May I ask, Patty, is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious because, we're hearing about these stimulus packages that are so needed and people so, they're really, this is desperate times. I'm just wondering, is this then going to be part of the national deficit? I mean, how is this getting paid for? I'm just curious. I don't have a judgment about it. I'm just curious how it works. Like, where's all the stimulus money coming from?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question for the Treasury.
Just like, do we have, does the federal government have like emergency funds that are never touched? I don't know. No one's talked about like, how are we, where's this money from?
Right. So
they may have to be a debt. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the federal government, the United States of America has been in debt for
long time.
A couple of centuries.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just where they have to look at, so a lot of times too, depending on what they're going to issue, they may issue treasury bonds, that kind of gets a little bit complicated. But yeah, that's definitely really a question more for, probably someone
like an economist or something. I was just wondering.
Question.
Yeah. Very good
it's not
question.
like $2 trillion can just appear.
I know. I can't even wrap
And,
my mind around that.
Sure. And we went through the same thing after 2008,
Oh, right.
So we went through that same thing. Anytime the government needs to raise money, like going back to the Civil War, even, in World War II, we saw them issuing war bonds, right? To raise money to fund the war. That was to fund the war.
I see.
Civil War was the same thing. They issued, I believe they issued bonds, the same thing during the Civil War in order to raise funds for the war. But for something like this, that's really a great question for the United States Church.
Nobody's said anything about it.
Yeah.
I think we've all thought it. Where's the money coming from?
That's a lot of money.
And going back to what I was saying about college students and high school students, you have a lot of college students who are paying their own way through school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. They are definitely in need, even though they may have come home. Because you have a lot of college students who were working, whether it's on their college campuses or if they were going to school locally to help pay for textbooks and help pay for tuition and room and board and things like that too. So for them, there absolutely is a need. So if you have a college student in that situation, yes, they are in just as much need as an adult trying to support a family because they're trying to basically support themselves.
Mm.
Yeah. On the opposite. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and to add to that, so with that, and I just want to make sure, if you are above the $75,000 annual income, are you allowed, or is your child still allowed to file, or do you know if they are?
Well, a lot of it too depends on if that child, so for example, if you claim them as a dependent on your taxes, no, they will not qualify for that because you claim them as a dependent. Gotcha. So it really depends on all that.
Okay. I was curious.
And I was going to say, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a question about when you're an older person and maybe you're living in a small apartment or alone, and depression's starting to get in, set in, Nicole. Do you have any suggestions for someone like that?
Boy, it's so interesting because I don't know if you folks have followed some of the research on solitary confinement. And it used to be, have you looked at that, Bridget?
I've just looked at it. I haven't gone in depth.
It's so fascinating. So they used to put teenagers in solitary confinement. And one thing we know about that is if you do that long enough, the mental health is significantly compromised. And what I mean is not just like I'm a little depressed and lonely, you get psychotic. Mm-hmm. If you're in a place that long enough with no human contact, because we are mammals. Mammals are made to hang out together in our little pods. And again, what I would do is reach out in any way you can. Facebook groups, any kind of connection. And it could be silly. I mean, if you knit, go into the knitting groups, go into the forums, just something like, hey, someone else is out there. Even what we're doing now is someone's asking a question, we hear them, we're responding to it. It reinforces this connection of, we're not alone. And so podcasts might be helpful, anything where there's a kind of interaction. And that's different, I think, than Netflix or, watching the news, because no one sees you. So I guess what I would say is, if you can stand that much social media, I would, like stuff, I comment on it, and you will find people then responding to you. And it might feel like a drop in the bucket, but it's certainly better than nothing. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind. It is better than nothing. One thing I'm finding in my neighborhood is that people who I've seen for years, and we pass by, I know that they live in the neighborhood. Now they're greeting me across the street like, I'm their best friend, and they haven't seen me in years, and we're all doing that. Hey, how are you doing? So if you can get outside, make some, from 6 feet, make some acknowledgement. You can smile or say hi. That is better than nothing, even if you're sitting on the stoop or your stair or something.
Yeah, I will have to say my mother-in-law is living alone right now. And so she's a very social person, and, she's on so much. I mean, she does so much. And we were like, oh my goodness, we were concerned. She's not near us at all. She's probably 5 hours away. So we FaceTime her, but she's so funny. And I think it's awesome what she's doing. She was a member of a movie group. So the little local theater, wherever they went, was kind of an artist theater. And I know that our local one in Nashville, Belcourt Theater, does this, where you can stream to help support the local theaters. But they turn on their computers and do like a Zoom call, and they all, interact with the movie. And then they also
they watch it together.
They watch it together. And I know that somebody mentioned a Netflix feature like that, but she had dinner the other night with her Zoom, with her friends, and she made her dinner, and she made her big dessert, big nice dinner.
Had
lovely. Her dark chocolate. And she just, and then she's also I think today's her spa day that she's created for herself. She's going to have spa day. And
she's a zestful ager.
She is.
Exactly.
I got to get her on my show. But one of the problems is, and that sounds fantastic, some older folks really struggle with the technology. Yeah. And I just realized, I don't know if folks have seen this, Zoom is requiring a password because people have been Zoom bombing. And I was like, password? What are you talking about? Until I finally figured it out. So she's got a real advantage. And it sounds like she's a real
she does not sit around. She goes. Yeah. And I love that she is a great example to my children, and that you don't just die out, So.
And along those lines, meetup.com, which is a site for friends, and when you move into a certain area, has local meetups, they might actually have some Zoom events too. So for those people who are a little bit lonely, maybe they can just type in meetup.com. If you're interested, like you said, in knitting or watching movies, type in your area and see if they're doing something on Zoom together and meet some people that way.
And, there's a Facebook group for everything. And, I think that's a nice way to connect with people. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's just like, how are we holding up? I'm trying this, I'm trying that. It just makes you feel like you're still alive and, part of the world.
Yes.
Patty, quick question. We had talked before about, so there are people out there right now who have been laid off or furloughed, can't afford necessarily groceries plus paying bills and everything. And if their credit cards are at a certain limit and they can only afford to pay the minimum, can they contact their credit card and say, can you lower can they negotiate interest payments?
Yeah.
Or lowering their interest rates?
Absolutely. There's not a guarantee, of course, that credit card company will, but yeah, absolutely call your credit card companies and just see if you've been a longtime customers of theirs, and if you've paid on time. You can go in with that approach and say, this is a situation we're finding ourselves in. I've been a client or customer since whatever that date was. I've always paid on time. What can we do together? As far as how can we lower this rate? Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's permanent, but at least you've given it a shot. You just, that's definitely a great avenue to pursue. It's not going to change the interest that may have accumulated already, but what it will do, if they agree to that, it will definitely reduce the interest, monthly interest going forward.
And I guess that really, depending on where you live, you could try that with your landlord or different other expenses. Maybe call and see if they would take payments or things like that.
Yeah, I know, Nicole, you're in New York. I'm originally from New York too, so that's awesome. I know in the state of New York, they have I think it's 3 months that you cannot be evicted for not paying your rent. Is that correct?
I don't know if it's 3 months, but there's something about that. Yeah, it's been addressed.
I believe Governor Cuomo did an executive order. I think it's 3 months, possibly. And so, yes, you're definitely going to want to check with your landlord now, I will say it's going to depend, do you live in a private residence are you renting a house, or are you in a, say, duplex where you may personally know your landlord? You may have that may be a great opportunity for you to talk with your landlord to see if they're willing to, make it over a weekly or furlough that for a little bit. If you live in an apartment complex, you're probably going to be dealing with whoever the residential person is, in the office. That person may not have the authority, because a lot of those apartment complexes are typically owned by a group of investors and companies. So but call anyway. You never know. They may have already negotiated something with those owners and investors to be able to have that authority. But yeah, absolutely check into that. The same thing with, I know there are some banks that are even furloughing auto payments. Like if you have a car loan, you may want to, call your lender, depending on where your car loan is, to see if they're able to furlough some of those car payments. That doesn't mean you're never going to have to pay it. It just means that they're just, putting that off, for the time being. Keep in mind too, depending on your situation, if you are if you're renting a house, your landlord may or may not be able to work with you depending on if they still have a mortgage, because if they have a mortgage, then they still have bills to pay too. So there's that ripple effect that way. But I absolutely encourage anyone in that situation to ask, because you just don't know until you absolutely do ask.
I wonder if there are any charities that the three of you know of that have been vetted and you think would be particularly helpful at this time for people.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I would think if people looked onto their state organizations, maybe they would have a list.
Yeah, I know I've seen some just locally where we are in Tennessee, not necessarily for rent or housing, but I've seen some food places. And I'm trying to think of what they were. I know I made actually a donation. Someone in our neighborhood was heading up the collection for just our local county. And I cannot remember the name of it.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe local community organizations go on their websites, and they might have a list of charitable organizations.
That's a good idea.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's a great idea. Also, if you are in a homeowners association, check with your homeowners association too, to see if because most HOAs have a website, and they may even have things listed on that website that you can tap into as well.
And I have seen just even places, I don't think our HOA, Colleen and I live in the same neighborhood. I have not seen anything where they would not be charging our dues. We pay quarterly. I have not seen that. But I did see a place where I'm a member that you have to have a minimum food thing like purchase, and they are putting that off. So that was one thing, you don't have to, we're not going to do those anymore. So there's a lot of places like that that are just holding out on things.
Sure.
And that go ahead, Patty.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing you can do too with your utilities, if you are paying your monthly utilities based on your usage, call your local utility company to see what it would be to get on a budgeted type billing. So what that does, depending on what part of the country you live in, and I think they base it typically on at least the last 4 quarters of your usage. So what that does is that gives you a dollar amount every single month that you know is what you're going to have to pay. If that dollar amount is pretty significantly less than what your current usage is, then see if you can go on that budgeted type billing. If it's not going to make that much of a difference, then it may or may not be worth it. And sometimes there's going to be an adjustment depending on what part of the country you're in. But at least that gives you more of a concrete number of what your utilities are going to be every month.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of utility companies too have programs for, thankfully now in the northern hemisphere here, we are headed into spring, right? But there are also a lot of utility companies that do have programs for people in need.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself, and this is not a time to be ashamed of anything. A lot of people are feeling financial shame. This is not a time to be ashamed of anything because we're all in the same boat, right? So don't hesitate at all to call your local utility company to see what that program might be in your area.
Yeah, I know our electric company here in Tennessee does, because I know on our bill there's a donation box. You can donate to that fund. So I know that they do that. And
it's a great idea.
Yeah. And like you said, the utility companies, I think when I lived in Pennsylvania, I can distinctly remember, because I was like in my 20s then, and really, really trying to budget everything. And I remember, for example, your electric bill would go up in the summer because you were using air conditioning, but the gas bill was down. But you could even both of those out so that you knew how to work within your budget.
Yep.
So basically make the calls. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
And you never know who, one, it could help you. And two, Nicole, it might make you feel a little more in control of what's happening. So much of what is going on right now, we are out of control about. We don't have a say in being in, our houses and stuff, but maybe making those phone calls, doing things like that, would that help kind of make people feel a little more in control of what's happening?
Well, that's a nice segue for the eating part. Is that something you want?
Getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when we get stressed, what do? We eat. I saw a report where the local stores, alcohol stores, have increased their sales tremendously over the last month because people are eating and drinking a lot more. So I know you do a lot with mindful eating. And I know that a lot of our listeners were probably eating chocolate and stressing a little bit right now.
I ordered a thing of cookies from Costco. I had 4 people here, and it was a huge thing of cookies. 2 days ago, they arrived. They are gone.
And it works. I mean, that's the thing.
And you didn't have any, right, Bridget?
3 cookies.
Well, as you mentioned, Colleen, this idea.
So that's my segue into mindful eating.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, control is a really big one right now, and loss of control, and people are typically overeating, but they're also undereating or over exercising, because it's sort of the 2 sides of the same coin. How can I make my world feel safer, more predictable, and contain my anxiety? It's a great distraction. And so if you are finding yourself kind of looking and prowling around saying, what can I eat? What can I eat? What can I eat? It's a really actually very effective way of not dealing with the fear and the terror of, I'm looking for something good to put in my mouth because I don't know if I can pay my rent next month. Mm-hmm. And, certainly don't want to bring any judgment to that. And the other piece is some people are finding that in order to help themselves feel more in control, they're actually eating less and being highly structured, over-structured in calorie intake and all of that. So it just depends on your personality type and which way, you naturally tend to go. It really works. I mean, both of these things kind of soothe us, and we're really desperate for soothing right now. Overeating works. It gives us this feeling of comfort. I mean, we're biologically programmed to like food, taste food. That's why we have taste buds. Chocolate's super yummy. I wouldn't want to have a life without chocolate. And so that, it all makes perfect sense. I think the first step in mindful eating is really just seeing if you can get a little quiet with yourself and wonder, what is the emotion that you're eating over? Is it boredom? Is it, what kind of stress is it? Is it fear? Is it just sort of this feeling unsettled? Are you about ready to, scream because you're with your partner so much there's no place to get a break? Are your kids like driving you crazy? And there's a lot of reasons why we feel stressed right now. But I think the first thing for mindful eating or mindfulness of any type is to really just be curious and wonder about, okay, here I am, I'm reaching for the chocolate. What's going on right now? And what do I need? And, you're trying to solve a problem. And I think what gets us into trouble is, oh my goodness, how much chocolate am I going to eat? I'm going to be 15 pounds more. And who needs this much chocolate? And I promised myself I wouldn't get into the snacks. And it's 8 o'clock and I'm already looking for something sweet. So unhelpful. Just stops the conversation. We don't learn anything from it. So really what I'm advocating, and people who do a lot of this work will say, you want to be curious and non-judgmental. What am I trying to cope with right now? Are there other ways to do that? And then if, those aren't helpful, then have the chocolate and, you'll live another day to tell a story. Now's not the time to get, I think, super perfectionistic about, are we eating our kale and are we, eating our complex carbohydrates? I mean, I'm very interested in healthy eating, but I also just made a cheesecake from Epicurious and it didn't last too long.
I've made one during this time, yes.
And, it's fine. We're not hurting people, presumably. We're not, committing crimes. We're trying to comfort ourselves like a kid who has a nightmare. You don't say get over it and deal with it, So I think the first thing would be to be curious, bring some self-compassion. Of course you're nervous. Of course you're freaking out. What might help? For me, it really helps to just take a walk around the neighborhood. I'm not talking about with, weights and, with a Fitbit. I'm just talking about going out, getting some fresh air, well, we don't have sun in upstate New York, but I understand that you guys have sun. Yeah, it exists. And so that's really helpful for me. As I mentioned, knitting's really helpful, writing in journal, these kind of things, but if none of that works, having a little chocolate is not the end of the world when you're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed you keep saying the word little, so like the bag of M&Ms would not be good.
Well,
okay.
The thing about the bag is interesting because actually it doesn't feel good after you eat. I've tried, that many M&Ms, like they taste good in the moment, but right. I don't think that you're enjoying the M&M if you're getting through a bag and then, you get that sort of acidy stomach upset. my recommendation for people is buy the best chocolate, if that's your thing, that you can afford, and really appreciate it and take time with it. And there's like 140 flavors in good chocolate. And I would really recommend buying good quality chocolate and enjoying it, because that's why we have taste buds. And you're more likely to, I think, get satisfaction out of that and then go to the next thing.
Mm-hmm. And this is like hand in hand with both of you. So during this time, I'm trying to avoid grocery stores at all costs. So I'm doing a lot of the ordering and delivering of food. Mm-hmm. And right now, and probably a lot of people are experiencing this, you get on, you fill up your basket, and then you can't get a day to pick it up.
That happened to me today. I spent half an hour
filling out a thing, and you fill up a whole thing, and you get down to the bottom, and there's no dates available. For the pickup. So I keep getting on in the morning, like 8 a.m. Okay, is there a day? Is there a day? Is there a day? So I find a day, and then what I did is I was like doing Kroger, Whole Foods, and Costco. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I did get a day with Whole Foods, which is delivered through Amazon. And then I was like, wait a minute. Now I got Costco. So, and then I'd already gotten Kroger. So I have like 3 days of all this food. So I'm spending a lot of money online. And then Costco delivery, I you know how everything's bulk size.
Right.
And I was trying to find flour. And there was only one size of flour. It was a 25-pound bag of flour.
That's like a silo.
Colleen, if you need flour, I can.
I know where to look. Just throw it at.
I almost put it on our community page and just said, "Hey, I'll trade some yeast for some flour."
That's great.
But in that light, I did try to order a lot of good food, but I told my kids, okay, we got to eat this spinach. We cannot let it ruin. And I'm trying to freeze things. I'm trying to, I have a thing of oranges like this big downstairs. So I'm like, I might as well squeeze it and make orange juice, out of it. But
sure.
I kind of got on that kick. So not only will we be overeating, we have overspent.
But you've got enough food now to last you for.
We do.
So it'll probably just, it'll just work itself out.
That's just, it's so funny. It's like this feeling of worrying that this is going to run out. I'm not going to have anything to back it up.
You mean almost, like toilet paper?
Maybe almost like the toilet paper, which I have not found anywhere, but I actually already had some anyway, so I'm good there. But it is so weird. It's like this hunt that I'm going to run out of everything.
That's the scarcity, and that makes you kind of a little crazy, right?
Yeah. And I think my mother-in-law said that she's like, when you do click list or whatever they do, Instacart or whatever, she said it's kind of like Christmas, where you're wondering, are you going to get what you asked for? Are you going to get the generic brand? and I said, if you found toilet paper or paper towels, it's like the Tickle Me Elmo or the Cabbage Patch Kid.
Right.
But that is one thing I have got to be careful anyway. But now I like to shop. Colleen knows this. And,
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know, Bridget, what are you talking about? You don't like to shop. But I'll get online and I'll be like, oh, okay. But I don't see what's happening. And not that, luckily I'm okay. I'm not in any kind of trouble. But that is another thing that people do, is shop online and overspend.
Well, don't you think that's kind of like the overeating? It's a thing.
Absolutely.
There is. And
it's a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot of emotional stuff going on, and emotions and money are like this.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I know Nicole was talking about just a few minutes ago, as far as not, giving ourselves permission to not be perfect. And the same thing goes with our finances, because, one of the things we see a lot too is, from the financial services communities, well, if you would have had an emergency plan, or if you would have had this or had that. And you know what? I'm sorry, but there's too much financial shaming that's going on, that there are a lot of things that none of us could have ever planned for, because in a perfect world, yes, everybody would have a great looking budget and spending plan, but it just doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. I'm not saying don't have an emergency plan, but what I am saying is don't beat yourself up. Don't feel, I'm not going to tell somebody how they should and shouldn't feel. I'm just saying, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Not the shame, back to the shame again.
Right.
Exactly. Because, and that's, yeah.
It was actually some guilt. I actually felt guilty.
Right.
When I got that huge order in, because I was like, oh my goodness, there are just 4 of us and we have so much food right now. I mean, I grew up one of 12 kids. I don't know if I ever saw that much food in our house. You know, that I had on my front doors, you know, in my front door Tuesday. I was like, oh my gosh.
Right.
Patty, I was thinking about something I saw on PBS the other night, that most Americans don't have $400 cash to get themselves out of an emergency. So how are they going to deal with this? And that's not because we're all buying BMWs. I mean, the economy is such that, I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole, but the middle class is really struggling.
It is.
Yeah, I believe it's close to 48 to 50% of the populace does not have $1,000 for an emergency. And, you know, there's so many variables there. Like you were saying, we could have a whole nother show, you know, talking about all those different variables. But all people really need to be concerned about right now is what they're doing right now. What can they do now? And then when we start getting to the other side of this, then I think we're going to see a lot of people are going to be reevaluating a lot of their life. Saw some of that after 2008. You know, in 2008, we saw people selling their homes whenever they could and buying RVs and crossing the country, you know, that type of thing. People were even putting up blogs about it. I think we're going to start to, but this is global. This is more than just the United States. Even though the recession in 2008 hit other countries too, we've never seen anything in our lifetime like this before. So I think we're going to see a lot of people reevaluating what's truly important in their lives. And of course, finances play a huge, huge role in that.
Do you have a, you know, in your professional opinion, how do you think once this ends, and it will end eventually, the job rate, do you think that people will start getting their jobs back pretty quickly? Or do you think we're going to have a different view on how jobs are going to be done? Because so many people are working online now and seeing how companies are seeing how productive that is. Companies are seeing how much money they can save by having people work online. Do you think that trend will continue?
I think, well, I don't know if it'll be a steady trend, but I think there are going to be a lot of companies out there that are going to, like companies before that were thrown into this, you know, by default versus companies who chose, you know, to have remote workers before. So I think a lot of those companies, it's going to depend on the industry. It's going to depend on the company. But yeah, so the thing is they can hire more people, right, to do the things that they need to do by saving money, by allowing them to work remotely. They're going to, you know, there are companies out there that are completely virtual and have been for a long, long time. So for them, this was kind of a non-issue. So it really depends on the type of company. Now, if you have a brick and mortar store that you're selling physical products, yes, of course, we want you to get back into that physical store selling brick and mortar products. But now is also the time to start truly thinking about, did you have an online presence before with shopping carts and all of that, that you can not only sell your primary products online, but what other complementary products can you also sell? And I know we don't really have time for this today, but affiliate marketing is a really great way for brick and mortar companies to have an online presence with their own products as well as complementary products that they can sell that they don't have to have inventory for.
Well, we will definitely talk about that when we add the show notes to all of that. So, especially when we have your episode. Along those lines, I know, Nicole, you said that you have been able to Zoom most of your clients, which is great.
Zoom has not worked. Actually, it's a kind of a weird thing. We have to be HIPAA compliant because some of these platforms are, as we've seen, you can hack them. But what's happened is that when we get on the hour, which is, of course, when our time starts, they're just crashing. So we were using Doxy, which is a HIPAA compliant like Zoom, and it was crashing. So what we've done, which is absolutely unprecedented, I've been doing this for 30 years, is we got a notification from the insurance companies saying, listen, do whatever you have to do. FaceTime,
really?
It doesn't even matter. We're in an emergency. All bets are off. So I've been doing most of my sessions on FaceTime. I have a tripod. I put my phone where my client would normally sit, and I try to keep it consistent with actually sitting in my regular chair and having all the furniture that they're used to.
Wow, that is so interesting. I didn't think about the HIPAA laws and everything.
No, people don't like to be hacked in when they're talking about this.
It kind of, that's a sensitive
the other thing that's happened, which again, unprecedented, and I don't know if this is in Patty's realm, but what's happening, at least in New York State, is since we're in a state of emergency, all the co-pays have been waived. Is that, Patty, are you familiar with that? Which has never happened.
That's going to depend on the insurance company. Excuse me. Water.
I know. I wanted to ask, are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I'm telling you, I must be the only person I know that can start choking on air.
Oh, no. I've done it. Yeah.
As long as you're okay.
I can trip on air too. Yeah,
exactly. So there are some insurance companies, some health insurance companies that are waiving copays. And of course, a lot of that depends on the state. So because depending on where that insurance company is licensed to do business in.
Oh, I knew you'd know more details. I'm not collecting copays, and that's never happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
And it's also so important. I know a lot of first responders and things like that have therapists on staff for them, which is wonderful. But there are a lot of states that are now having 800 numbers where you can call, and there are psychology grad students that are willing to talk to you for
volunteers.
free, which is, again, if you're lonely, going back to that loneliness, if you really feel that badly, call them.
That's a great idea.
It's do something to make you feel connected, like you said. And we're seeing a lot of I see a lot of memes on that are, people saying, it's okay. Why am I so not productive? Why am I not being more productive? And people, it's okay to not be okay right now. No one is okay right now. And I love that one industry hiring like crazy is online therapy companies.
I saw that. Yeah, somebody.
It's really been interesting, and I don't know how much your audience wants to hear about this, but the experience is very different. And I've seen people write about this, but, now I'm seeing people like in their bedrooms, in their kitchen, taking care of their kids, washing their hair while we're talking. So you're getting a much different perspective on your clients' lives. It's also very odd as a therapist because you can't get as much sort of eye contact, body language, just the sense in the room. So I'm missing, I feel like 35% of the data that I use, I'm missing the inputs to help me follow the emotions and where we're going.
Really
so it's weirdly tiring because I have to focus so hard to get the same information I would sitting in the room across from someone.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a great point because body language is so key. We even see that in the financial realm too, it is so key. And you don't get that. And then, and I don't know about your clients, but you get a lot of people who have never done the, Zoom or FaceTime before, and then they're like, oh, and then they kind of freeze up too, because they're like, okay, it's just kind of, it's
awkward or
not as natural.
Awkward and a little impersonal. I mean, it's what we've got to deal with.
Yeah.
Right now, but.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like to ask a final question for both of you. So, Patty, are there any suggestions you have for people to kind of feel more in control of their finances, little things they can do that maybe we haven't talked about, besides like ending their subscriptions and things like that? Sure.
I would say, the biggest thing right now is just know your numbers. Just know your numbers. Know what those are. You're in a place right now where the most important things are the things that you need to be concerned about. And that's putting food on the table, keeping the roof over your head, and keeping the lights on in your house. And, even as a financial therapist, because I talk a lot about, personal self-care and financial self-care and how intertwined they are, just do 10 minutes, just a little 10-minute thing that's just for you every day. Because as women, when we do start to feel better about ourselves, then we start to approach our finances from a much different perspective. And those things might seem trivial now, not now, but under normal circumstances, those things might seem trivial, but right now they're super, super important.
Colleen, did you see one more question?
Yeah, we had, how do we continue to go after business or when this is over? Well, I think they mean like how our business is going to be when this is over. And I don't even know if Patty would be able to take a guess on that, because this was a forced almost recession. I mean, are we going to go into a recession, I guess should be the question.
Yeah. And I know we talked about that a little bit the other day. And it's interesting because there will be a recession. I mean, economists are already talking about that now. So it's not like I'm making, some profound statement. But before all of this happened with the pandemic, the economy was, the fundamentals of the economy were in great shape. So this is being caused not by fundamentals of the economy, but by a medical situation.
Right.
However, the pandemic is causing economic issues for businesses. So, there's so much up in the air right now that we're just going to really have to see. A lot of it's going to depend on that type of business, what kind of cash flow they have, what are their cash reserves, what type of business they are. There's just too many variables to say. I mean, if you are, I will say, if you are, and that's a big capital IF, if you are in a position to support your local businesses who are the lifeblood of your community, by all means do so. But you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help someone else.
And along those lines, there's one other, I think what the person was meaning to say is, let's say you have an online business that you have a lot of emails and things like that you list. Is it okay to still send people your business information?
Be mindful. If you are a business owner or if you are an online business, you don't want to be tone deaf right now for what's going on. You want to understand and address in the best way possible what your prospects and potential clients may be going through right now.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. And Nicole, we talked about so much about it's okay to not be okay right now. What advice would you give people who are just not okay right now? They just don't know how they're going to go through the entire month of April and possibly longer on a stay-at-home order.
Well, I think it depends on what you mean when you say how not okay are they?
Right.
If they're feeling, suicidal, they definitely need to reach out to services. There in every city, we have something called Contact. You can call, and there's a hotline. I think you also need to talk to your significant other or a family member, because what we know about suicidal feelings is they really come and they go. And if you're depressed, you can't see things clearly. So to make a judgment like that when you're feeling so overwhelmed and depressed is really, it's the wrong time to make such a profound decision. So I would say that. And my advice to my clients is we're really back to basics here. Nothing fancy. Make yourself a soup, cut some, vegetables, really basic. Make sure you're getting rest. Not all of us are sleeping that well, so you might want to take a nap. Do some really basic relaxation breathing, which can be really helpful because when we breathe deeply, it affects our vagus nerve, which then talks to our brain that says you're safe. So that's just a matter of doing some, I'm not talking even about in one nostril out. I'm just talking about watching your breath, paying attention to your breath for a few minutes. People have been finding like going through some of their old stuff can be a little helpful. Decluttering, nothing on a grand scale because that takes energy, but just going through like a drawer, your junk drawer, can make you feel like, oh, I accomplished something today. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, which right now we're not getting a lot of. So little projects like that can be helpful. And then if you have a spiritual life at all, going out in nature can be really helpful, sort of seeing a bigger picture and knowing like, I'm just this little grain of sand here. There's a whole wide universe. And that can also be very soothing for people.
That's great. Thank you both so much, Nicole Christina and Patty Gale. If we get further questions from anybody, we'll definitely email them to you guys. Can you let the listeners know where they could get in touch with you if they wanted to? Nicole, can you?
Sure. I have a podcast called Zestful Aging, and we're talking about some of these issues. And it's for people who are middle-aged, post-middle-age, talking about, what life's like and fulfilling our potential. And you can find me at zestfulaging.com or listen to the podcast. It's at Zestful Aging, and it's on all major platforms.
I heard you have a guest, something like a hot flashes group. Or
yes, I do. I do. lovely guests. Yes. Looking forward to airing that. I think people will really enjoy that.
And I think you're going to be guesting on their show as well.
Yes, I heard that through the grapevine.
And Patty, how can people, I see you a lot on LinkedIn, but how can people get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. The best way to get in touch with me is on the website, which is fearlessgirlfinancial.com. And I also have a Facebook group as well for midlife women who we talk about the money. And we talk about the emotional piece and the financial piece. And you can search on Facebook or just reach out to me directly, and I'll get you connected that way.
And I love that you call yourself a financial therapist, not an advisor, not a planner, but you also connect a lot of the emotion and the heart center through what you do, which is great.
Thank you. Yeah, because I don't sell insurance or investment products or anything like that. So.
Well, thank you both very much for coming on today and spending time. And thanks, guys, for watching. So have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe.